Welcome back to r/Neighbors from Hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors, and if you're new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community, and without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. And by the way guys, today's story consists of 3 parts, so I would suggest to listen until the very end. Anyway, the first part is titled "Neighbor Messed With My Garden, I Ruined Their Property with Ants." Once many years ago, we innocently bought a house next door to a retired Marine couple. She was about 6'1" and strongly resembled Arnold, it is not a tumor, in his current state, and he was about 5'6" and probably weighed around 130 pounds. They were very house/yard proud and thoroughly obnoxious about it. After living next to them for a short time, for some unknown reason, no really, they decided to mount a campaign of general obnoxiousness against us. It started small, a note on a friend's car that he was 3 inches over on their side when parked on the street in front of our house. Then it escalated rapidly. They reported us to animal control for farm animals inside the city limit. We had 2 Shih Tzus, they were not used to pull a plow. They reported us to the health department for leaving our pool with a small amount of water in it and breeding mosquitoes. It was hydrochloric acid being used to wash the pool and prep it for repair, as it was derelict when we moved in. They reported us for repairing our fence without a permit, not moving it, not tearing it down or replacing it. We merely nailed some boards back up. They also reported us for loud parties and quiet parties and no parties. They called City Hall on us so often it became a joke amongst those hollowed halls. All the while, they continued with the small harassments as well. We ignored all of this, just making sure we had an extra plate for whatever official they called out that day. But then they committed the ultimate crime. We were eating breakfast on the patio one lovely morning when I happened to look over and see a sprayer nozzle come through the fence slats. And they sprayed poison on my tomato and jalapeno plants. Now, we love our salsa and I make an absolutely exquisite fresh salsa. And they dared to spray poison on my tomato and jalapeno plants. Poison my tomatoes and peppers, will you? In Texas, that's a killing offense. Sadly, we did not live in Texas, so I was forced to devise my own punishment. One thing about their house is that it must have been built on an ant hill. They constantly fought ants. We regularly heard them complaining about ants as they tried to rid them from their backyard. Our homes were built on a golf course and being considered patio homes all had lovely large patios with huge kitchen windows with sliding glass opening onto a pass-through/serving counter. So I made a very large batch of simple syrup and froze it in ice cube trays. Friends and I would sit on our patio and toss ice cubes. We had a point system that ranged from getting the cubes on the patio to getting them up against the base of the sliding door to getting them onto the counter and up against the opening of the window. We gave them ants, lots of ants. Not being particularly close neighbors, the Marines gave us no warning when they went on vacation. We did notice it got quieter and I didn't overhear any further discussion between them about the sticky mess that regularly showed up on their patio, but I really did not think about it. Besides, I was behind on points, so the bombardment continued. The ants celebrated. They sent out telegrams worldwide inviting all of their relatives to move. They had found paradise, the grass was green and there were regular supply drops. They invaded. There were tiny black ants, larger brown ants and big red ants. Hosannas were sung, they built neighborhoods of McAnsions, and Rockets did the can-can across the counter, they held parades, there were Friday night fiestas with live and mariachi bands. It was beautiful. I went through 3 5-pound bags of sugar. We knew exactly when the Marines got home from their 6-week cruise. We could tell by the screeches of anguish. Apparently, the ants had made their way inside. There were screams from the kitchen and the pantry and the laundry room and the bathroom. It was absolutely ear-shattering. Who knew a 5'7" male could even make those sounds? The battle was enjoined, the army ants dug foxholes and built redoubts, the fire ants formed special forces teams and close protection units. The war raged for months. Despite regular resupply, the ants were decimated. The Marines were seen collapsed in patio chairs, hollow-eyed with exhaustion, their once pristine backyard closely resembling the aftermath of the Battle of Ypres. Peace talks were held, détente was achieved, calm reigned on Avenida Pancho Villa. Until the Marines got their second breath and reinforcements in the form of their son, the Marine Jr. further shenanigans ensued. And yours truly discovered that raccoons are not only exceedingly dexterous, they are inordinately fond of overripe figs. But that is another tale. And yeah guys, I gotta admit, that is probably one of the best neighbor stories I have ever heard. Really well written. And if you have watched until here and enjoy the stories about crazy neighbors, then please don't forget to post some star emojis in the comments if you enjoy my content. Thank you so much in advance. And the next one is part 2 of the Marine Neighbors story. When we last left off, it was the end of the Great Ant Wars and the Marines were beginning recovery. As happens, time passed and several months later they were back to their version of normal. The devastation wrought by the Great Ant Wars on their backyard had been mainly eradicated and life on Avenida Pancho Villa was back to its natural, orderly routine when one morning the Tomato Avengers and Rescue Troop was gathered on my patio. This was a recurring assemblage of the core group, usually involving mimosas or margaritas. And we heard a large vehicle pull into the Marines' driveway. Not being nosy, just curious, everyone ran over to take a peek. Except me/ambled. It was a pickup truck, one of the very tall and very long ones, and out of it climbed the Marine Jr. In looks, he was the perfect combination of his parents. In personality, well, he didn't have one, unless arrogance counts as personality. I am genuinely surprised he didn't regularly trip and fall since he walked around with his nose so far up in the air it was practically upside down. How he managed to avoid drowning when out in the rain remains a mystery, and to be frank, if I may, he was a bit, shall we say, dim? In other words, he was a complete cockwomble. And he was not there just for a visit, he had somehow managed to get himself PCS to the local base and was moving in. This was generally regarded as a good thing in the neighborhood, but he really was not our problem. I should explain that we lived in a small tract right at the edge of the city limits. It consisted of 4 streets, each about 3 blocks long. We lived on the first street, which had the only driving entrance/exit. Across from the entrance was a park with walking/bike trails and a river. Behind us was the golf course separated by a 4-foot tall chain link fence with an access gate to the course. All of the other fencing in the tract was 6 inches privacy fencing. And on the other side of the tract opposite the golf course was the end of the city limits and a farm. The farmer mainly grew things, but he did keep several interesting animals in the field at the end of the street crossing the entrance into our tract. On a lovely morning a few weeks after the arrival of the Marine Jr., the Tarts and I were out for our daily perambulations and Jess, all names have been changed for the protection of the completely innocent, noticed the farmer had added a miniature horse to his little animal collection. Now, Jess was the ultimate animal lover but hadn't had any experience with live animals other than cats, and she decided she had to pet the miniature horse. So we make our way in that direction as she tries to convince him to come up to the fence. He did not want to come up to the fence and obviously didn't find her entreaties persuasive. Thus she decided to go to him. Jess is an utterly delightful human being and a joy to be around, but she was not dressed for the occasion. On this morning she was wearing a kind of big flowy top, tight white jeans, as she herself has said in similar phrasing, I have to wear jeans that look like they were painted on. It is the only thing that keeps my double white ass from jiggling so much I just spin in circles. And 4-inch high-heeled lipstick red sandals that brought her up to about 6 feet tall. This was her usual attire for going for a walk or pretty much anywhere, I should add. Needless to say, her attempt to scale the fence did not go well. But then someone, who should have known better, and I don't want to talk about it, pointed out there was no lock on the gate. And through it she went. This field consisted of some grass, lots of mud, huge mud holes and more mud, so she carefully picked her way over to the miniature horse and reached out to pet him. He bit her, she shrieked and began to run back to the gate. Also in the field was a donkey or two llamas and a goat. Evidently the goat had taken the mini horse under his wing and it began to chase her. It was faster than she was and caught up with her about halfway to the gate, whereupon it butted her into a mud hole, a large mud hole, the largest mud hole I had ever seen anyone butted into by a goat. She went in face first. Now I have heard that a mud bath is good for your skin, but I don't think they were talking about this. The rest of us ran to her rescue, and while a couple of us diverted the goat, who seemed intent on repeating the exercise, the others helped Jess up, breaking the heel of one sandal in the process, but we were in a bit of a hurry. And then we all ran/limped for the gate. We got ourselves outside of the field, closed the gate and took stock, and realized we still had a minor problem. The 5 of us were on one side of the fence, covered in mud, one with a broken heel on her shoe and one missing a shoe entirely. This was the good part, as we were on the right side of the fence, but the 2 llamas that had joined us were not. And on the other side of the fence, right at the gate, was a cranky miniature horse, 2 donkeys and an angry goat. Reopening the gate to try to herd the llamas in did not really seem like the thing to do. While we were debating the issue, the llamas decided to go for a walk and explore this new territory. Since we didn't want them to end up on the 4-lane at the end of the street, we chased after them and eventually managed to get around them and sort of aim them up into our neighborhood. We actually meant to head them back to the field, but they were not interested in that. They were not especially appreciative of our efforts at herding either, but did at least end up moving in the right direction. If you recall, this is the street Jess and I lived on. I was on the golf course side next door to the Marines and she was directly across from them. As the llamas sauntered down the street tasting a few enticing plants en route, we decided to just put them in the backyard and call the farmer to tell him they had gone for a ramble. Needless to say, as llama herders we were abysmal failures and they mostly went where they wanted, showing no gratitude at all for our efforts. But I ran around them and opened the nearest gate and the others eventually shooed them into the backyard. Then we collapsed in relief and went to hose ourselves down before trying to get inside to actually clean up. We were in the back with the hose when Beloved became aware of the commotion and poked his head out the door to say hi. Of course, we all froze when we heard him coming, but he didn't really notice until mid-sentence, whereupon he paused, gave a couple of slow blinks and said, "That is clay, don't let it wash into the pool, it's bad for it." "We won't." And he took his refilled coffee cup back into his office to hide some more. What does all that have to do with the Marine Junior, you ask? Well, I am getting there. We managed to get ourselves cleaned up and met again on our patio to, after suitable refreshments were served, attempt to find the phone number for the farmer so we could notify him of his wandering llamas that needed a ride home. Just then we heard the Marine Junior's truck. What he was doing home in the middle of a Wednesday afternoon was anyone's guess. The Marines were never home on Wednesdays, just never. On hearing his truck, we kind of peeked around the corner of the house and spotted him going inside. He was wearing a uniform, a real uniform, the kind that looks like a suit, not chemis/BDUs. Jenny suggested that he was probably just home to change outfits and might just do that and leave again right away without noticing, and we all hoped she was correct. However, she was not correct. As a matter of fact, our chorus of agreement was cut off by the sound of the sliding door into their backyard opening. Then we heard some Marine language and a crash, and maybe a bang and some more pungent, louder Marine language. So we all ran over and climbed up on some blocks at the edge of the fence to be able to see what was happening. Llamas are very cute animals and you might think they are very pettable, but in reality they are generally bad-tempered beasties who kick and bite and spit. For those interested, llama spit is thick, gluey, greenish and smells like grass or hay or some such thing. The loud marine language disturbed Beloved and he meandered out and looked over the fence just as the llamas backed the Marine Junior into a corner. The Marine Junior had not fared well thus far in the encounter. His nice spiffy uniform shirt was torn in kind of a bite shape and had several large greenish splotches, and he was limping. Beloved, llamas? What was he thinking? That yard is much too small for llamas. They are not even legal inside the city limits. About then he looked at me and I gave him the anime eyes, making him retreat again to his office, muttering his mantra under his breath. His mantra being, I don't wanna know, it will look better when I pay the bail if I can genuinely say I had no prior knowledge. I did make his favorite chicken enchiladas for dinner that night. This is when the Marine Junior looked up and saw all 5 of our faces hanging over the fence as we watched and decided for some entirely unfathomable reason it was my fault. When really, had he just stayed at work like he was supposed to, the llamas would have caught a ride back to the field and no one else would have been aware of their visit. And the Marines and the Marine Junior began another campaign of irritating behavior. Which is why I decided I was happy we had a fig tree. To be continued. And now the last part of the story. To start the story properly, because I'm always very proper, once upon a time we had some neighbors, the Marines and the Marine Junior, who took exception to something I did. I have no idea what set them off originally, unless maybe it was John the Scot, but I do have an inkling, just a sneaking suspicion of why their pestiferous campaign of minor annoyances continued after the Great Ant War. I have explained them in parts 1 and 2, so I won't go into too much detail, except to say that after recovering from the Great Ant War and the visiting llamas, they began their campaign of irritation again. I parked in our driveway since we kept the Lagonda and the dune buggy in the garage with Beloved's car, so there was not room for my car, and I began noticing a small crunching sound as I left in the morning for work. Usually I was in a hurry, but finally one day I had time to check and found a small stack of gravel behind the left rear tire. Every morning it crunched as I backed over it. We didn't have any gravel. Our driveway was cement, so I started watching, and lo and behold, the Marine Senior was sneaking over every morning to place a tiny pile of gravel behind my wheel. I have no idea what he was thinking, as there seemed to be no purpose, but he seemed to find it amusing. Anyway, one morning I was watching as he came over to place the gravel, and I grabbed Beloved and we went outside. We opened the front door, and when we did, we made sure to pause because we wanted to see what the Marine Senior would do. He ran over, sort of in a crouch, and tried to conceal himself in the ground cover. You see, it was a little hilly where we lived, and there was a slope from our front yard down to the sidewalk that was slightly taller than I am, covered in English ivy. So he was slightly below us and stretched out in the ivy, the kind that always looks full of spiders. In the front we had a small round patio shaded by a nice tree and a bistro set, and we decided to have our coffee there and pretend we hadn't noticed him. We kept him trapped there for a good 45 minutes, never did let him know we were aware of his presence. Bet he got a few bug bites out of it, he did quit with the gravel at least. The Marine Junior drove a truck, one of those with the tires taller than I am and a full back seat with a full-length bed. Because they lived on the curve, the Marines had ended up with a shorter driveway and the Marine Junior couldn't fit his truck in it, so he had to park on the street. So he parked in front of our house, even though they left nasty notes on the cars of people who've parked in front of their house. It was actually convenient for me. One of our lemon trees was right next to where he parked, and having his truck to climb on meant I could reach the upper part of the tree to pick those lemons. I cook a lot of things with lemons, so considered that very thoughtful of him. All I had to do was climb into the back of the truck and stand on the sidewall to reach. It was perfect. I don't think the Marine Junior did it for my convenience though, since he got a little irate when he saw me up there. So they continued with the pesky little annoyances and we continued ignoring them. Then, one evening, I heard the sound of little feet going pitter-patter across the roof. I've had the smallest feet in our house since son number 2 was about 8 and I was not pitter-pattering across the roof. So I went and looked, and there, lined up in a nice tidy row, was a family of 5 raccoons washing figs in the pool. Up to this point I avidly disliked that tree, like the figs, but whoever planted it got too close and half of the tree leaned over right above the pool, making a constant mess of leaves and figs dropping in the water. So I went in and discussed with my beloved husband. Me, is it bad to have raccoons running across the roof? Beloved, from behind his book, well, it's not good. Me, should we do something about it? Beloved, still reading, seems like a good idea. Me, okay. The next morning the boys and I picked up all the figs that had fallen overnight and most of the ones still on the tree. It was a very prolific tree. That evening the raccoons broke into the sealed bin and had a nice fig meal and left a big mess. While we were cleaning up, son number 1 was complaining about the smell of the overripe figs, and beloved husband explained the process of fermentation. He thought he was giving a science lesson, so did son number 1. Son number 2 did not regard it as a science lesson, he thought it was an invitation to attempt alcohol production. So he decided to try making fig alcohol from the overripe figs. A couple of evenings later we were entertaining Jess and Mrs. Jess and heard the pitter-patter of little feet across the roof. Before we finished dinner, we heard the singing of drunk raccoons. And by the way guys, if you have watched until here, thank you so much for listening until the end, and a big shout out to Sly Raccoon, the greatest thief of all time, but I'm not sure how many people will get that reference. Anyway, the Marines and the Marine Junior were outside on their patio, and one of the drunks fell for the Marine Junior. The little lush made her way, staggering slightly over to Marine Junior and lovingly rubbed her cheek against his leg. The Marine Junior showed no appreciation for her affection, screeched and booted her away. She rolled across the lawn, and when she stopped rolling she drunkenly made her way back to the Marine Junior and snuggled his leg again. He screamed and booted her, she staggered back and snuggled. This went on until he gave up and went inside. This went on for several nights, and we all enjoyed the determination of the amorous little drunk. Well, all except the Marine Junior. Because we are the helpful sort, we threw a few of the overripe figs up on the Marine's shake shingle roof. And all of the raccoons moved over there because they liked that type of roof better. The Marine, Junior's admirer, brought her entire family to meet him, and they borrowed some of the shake shingles to build their homes, and so did their friends and relatives. We continued disposing of the figs so they didn't come back to us, and we continued throwing the overripe figs on top of the Marine's roof and monitoring the raccoons as they danced and staggered around the roof, because drunk raccoons are really funny. They figured out how to remove the cap and screen on the chimney and made themselves at home. I think they even figured out how to turn on the TV. From the sounds, it is distinctly possible that the love-struck little pest might even have ascertained which bedroom belonged to the Marine Junior. Must be lovely to wake up to an enamored raccoon in your bed. The Marines and the Marine Junior finally trapped all of the raccoons and took them to the county to be relocated. All except the Marine Junior's impassioned friend, who managed to avoid being hauled off, but she became much more discreet. Anyway, shortly thereafter we saw a for sale sign up in their yard. Don't know why, it was a nice neighborhood though, and the house sold fairly quickly. The tarts all watched from our yard as they loaded the last of their belongings on the Marine Junior's truck. Me? Wait, what? Jess? Yep, sure was. Jenny? True love conquers all. The love-struck little drunk had managed to hide in the truck and was moving with the Marine Junior. And we will all swear she was giving the beauty queen wave as they drove off down the street. And yeah guys, really props to you if you have watched the entire video. Thank you so much. It really means a lot to me when you watch the entire video, because certainly that is only the top 10% of my supporters that really do that. Thank you so much. And ripe stars, unfortunately, we have reached the end of this video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless YouTube playlists. which should pop up on the left side of the screen in about 10 or 20 seconds. These playlists should definitely keep you busy, and I would really appreciate if you could listen to them before going to sleep. This would help my channel tremendously. If you still cannot get enough, then please don't forget to check out my Patreon at patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive Reddit videos that you won't find on YouTube. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching.